Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going exploring, well, I guess you could say exploring ourselves, emotions.
Emotions.
We've got a bunch of quotes and excerpts here from some pretty heavy hitters.
Yeah, we got some interesting thinkers here.
We got Eckhart Tolle. We've got even a little bit of L. Ron Hubbard in here.
A little bit.
Dr. John Coleman.
Yeah.
Really all trying to figure out how emotions work, how they affect us as people, and how they can be used against us.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because these sources, even though they come from such different viewpoints, they all seem to agree that emotions are very powerful forces.
Yeah, and that they can be used both, for good and for evil, basically, like a
Exactly.
double-edged sword.
A double-edged sword, yeah.
So that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to give you, the listener, the tools to be able to understand how emotions work so you can, navigate this world that we live in.
Because it's a world that honestly wants to make you feel something.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you turn on the news, you go on social media, it's just like an assault of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads us to, make decisions that we maybe later regret.
Exactly.
We get caught up in the moment.
Yeah, we react emotionally, and then later on we think, oh, why did I do that? Or why did I say that?
I shouldn't have bought that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it all goes back to, I guess, this idea of emotion sometimes working against our own best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And Eckhart Tolle, in The Power of Now, talks about how emotions and rational thought can be at odds with each other.
Yeah.
You get really excited about something.
Absolutely.
All logic goes out the window.
Yeah, Tolle actually refers to this as our life drama.
Life drama.
Life drama, yeah. He says it's like this story we're constantly telling ourselves. And our ego, which is that part of us that wants to be in control, thrives on negativity and conflict.
The ego.
The ego.
So it's like our ego is
It feeds off of these emotional ups and downs because it creates a sense of identity.
Oh, so the ego is like a drama queen.
Yeah.
Always looking for the next scene to play out in our lives.
Yes. And just like in a soap opera, this drama keeps us stuck in these cycles of reaction and suffering. We keep making the same mistakes, getting triggered by the same things, and wondering why we can't break free.
Okay, so this is where something called the tone scale comes in. Now, I know a lot of people are going to hear tone scale and think L. Ron Hubbard, and it's going to, maybe turn them off a little bit. But if we can set that aside for a second, it's actually a really useful tool for understanding these the spectrum of human emotions. It's like it lays it all out from like apathy and fear and all the way up to, enthusiasm and joy.
Yeah, think of the tone scale as kind of a map. And if you understand where someone is on that map emotionally, you can better understand why they're acting the way they are and how they might try to influence you.
Okay, so we take this into the realm of how people can use these emotions against us. And it starts to get a little
Absolutely.
little unsettling.
It gets a little unsettling because you look at Dr. John Coleman, who wrote the book Targets of the Illuminati, and he talks about this thing called the Aquarian conspiracy, which is basically, people, these groups are trying to destabilize society by pushing things that trigger lower tone emotions like fear, anger, and apathy.
And that sounds a little, conspiracy theory-ish.
Yeah.
But then when you look at what we see, in our media today.
Yeah, you see how it might resonate with some people, right? Like the constant barrage of negativity in the news, the fear-mongering, the outrage culture on social media. It's like we're constantly being bombarded with these messages.
And I think that leads us to this quote from Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars that I thought was really chilling. Because it literally talks about using emotions as a weapon, to control the masses.
Yeah, to engage their emotions, I think is how they put it. To control them, to keep them distracted and emotionally drained so they don't have the energy or the motivation to think critically or challenge anything.
So, I mean, if you're constantly in this state of fear or anxiety,
Absolutely.
I mean, wouldn't that make you more susceptible to being manipulated?
Absolutely, because you're already in that state. You're already feeling down and anxious, and you're more likely to believe something, even if it's not true,
Right.
that confirms those fears. And this is where understanding these dynamics, I think, is so important because there are things we can do to break free from this.
Yeah, this is great.
We don't have to be victims of our emotions.
This is what I want to get into. Yeah.
We can learn to recognize them, understand them, and choose how we respond. That's what's so powerful about all of this.
I love that. We have more control than we think.
We do. It all starts with awareness. Okay, so let's dive into that.
Let's dive into that. It can feel pretty, I guess, disempowering when you start to realize how your emotions can be used against you. But we're not totally powerless. There are things we can do to kind of take back control. And that's what I think makes this next section so interesting. Yeah, and I think this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we live in a culture now where it's all about embracing your emotions. Be authentic, be vulnerable. But what if what if those emotions are actually what's holding you back?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like this counterintuitive idea that maybe our emotions aren't always serving us. And two of the sources that you pulled actually address this, which I thought was really interesting. T. Leary and Robert Anton Wilson. They both kind of challenge this idea of, emotions are always good. Leary even goes so far as to call emotions a low form of jungle consciousness.
Jungle consciousness.
Wow. So, pretty strong words. But it's not to say that we should suppress our emotions, but more that we need to be aware of how they can cloud our judgment and lead to these impulsive actions that we might later regret. It's like they're signals, right? They're telling us something, but we don't have to blindly obey them. We can choose how we respond.
Like if you're feeling angry, maybe that anger is a sign that a boundary's have been crossed or that something needs to change. But it doesn't mean that you need to, lash out or do something destructive.
Right. And Robert Anton Wilson kind of adds another layer to this. He talks about how we create these emotional games, these like soap operas or these grand operas as a way to distract ourselves from doing the real work, which is increasing our intelligence and our self-awareness.
It's easier to get caught up in the drama,
It is. It is.
the highs and lows, than it is to actually face those things head on.
And our ego is perfectly happy to keep us stuck there. It loves that drama.
And this brings us to another really important point that came up in a lot of these sources, and that's forgiveness.
Yeah.
But
Forget it.
why is that so crucial when we're talking about emotional control?
I think it's because if we're holding on to anger and resentment, we're basically letting those emotions control us, right? There's this great Catherine Ponder quote that really gets to the heart of it. And she says, "When you hold resentment toward another, you are bound to that person or condition by an emotional link that is stronger than steel."
Wow. So forgiveness is about breaking those chains.
It is. It's about breaking free from that. And, it's important to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean that you're condoning the behavior or that you're saying what happened was okay. It's about choosing to release that negativity and resentment that is poisoning you.
And there's another quote that I really like, and I can't remember who said it, but it was something like, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
Which I thought was such a powerful image. It's like, it's not about letting the other person off the hook. It's about saving yourself.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Yeah. So if we want to break free from this, from manipulation and really take control of our emotions, where do we even start?
I think it starts with awareness. We need to recognize how these dynamics are playing out in our own lives and in the world around us. Pay attention to how you react to things. Notice what triggers you, what pushes your buttons.
It's that mindfulness.
And remember the tone scale we talked about earlier?
That can be a really useful tool for this because you can start to become aware of where you are on that scale at any given moment. And that's really powerful.
So the tone scale helps us become more emotionally intelligent, not only in understanding others, but understanding ourselves as well.
Absolutely. And once we have that awareness, then we can start to make conscious choices about the emotional states we want to cultivate in our lives. And Ruth Minchell, she talks about this in her book, How to Choose Your People. And she says that we're actually naturally drawn to people who operate at a slightly higher emotional level than we do.
Oh, that's interesting. So, that means that we can actually attract better things into our lives by raising our own vibration.
Absolutely.
Emotionally speaking.
It's like saying you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you surround yourself with people who are constantly negative and complaining, it's going to bring you down.
Yeah.
But if you surround yourself with positive, supportive, uplifting people,
right, you're going to feel better, and you're going to raise your own emotional state as well.
It's all about being intentional about what you're letting into your life.
It is. It's about making a conscious effort to cultivate higher tone emotions like enthusiasm, joy, and love. And remember, as Eckhart Tolle said, true joy isn't an emotion, it's a state of being.
So it's not about chasing happiness, but about finding that deeper sense of peace and contentment.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of this comes down to making conscious choices moment by moment about how we want to feel and how we want to respond to the world around us.
Absolutely. We have more power than we realize. And it's not easy. It takes practice. But it is possible to break free from the grip of negative emotions and create a more fulfilling and authentic life.
Okay, so we talked about awareness, forgiveness, and choosing our emotional state. What are some other practical steps we can take to become more resilient and to not let ourselves be so easily manipulated?
Well, I think one thing that's really important is to be mindful of the information we're consuming. What are we reading? What are we watching? What are we listening to? Because if we're constantly exposing ourselves to negativity, it's going to have an impact on our emotional state. It's garbage in, garbage out.
Right, so we're not saying bury your head in the sand and pretend like everything's fine, but choose your information wisely.
Exactly. Seek out content that's uplifting, that's inspiring, and be mindful of how much time you're spending on social media because that can be a real breeding ground for negativity.
It's so easy to get sucked into those comparison traps, the outrage, and
It is. And it can be very draining. So, be intentional about how you're using social media, set some limits. Curate your feed, unfollow accounts that trigger you or bring you down.
so use it as a tool. Don't let it use you.
Absolutely. And another thing that I think is incredibly powerful is mindfulness.
Yeah.
Just taking some time each day to just be present, to notice your thoughts and feelings without judgment. And there are a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness, but one very simple technique is to just focus on your breath. Take a few minutes each day to just sit quietly and notice the sensation of your breath as you inhale and exhale.
It's amazing how something so simple can be so effective.
It is. And it's because you're creating that space between your thoughts and your feelings so you can start to choose how you want to respond rather than just reacting automatically.
Yeah, you're not just along for the ride anymore.
Exactly.
You're the one in the driver's seat. You get to choose where you go.
You are. And it brings us back to that idea that we have more power over our emotional experience than we often realize.
So as we kind of move towards wrapping up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways that our listeners can start applying in their lives today to become more resilient, to not be manipulated?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I think the most important thing is to remember that you are not alone. Everybody experiences these challenges. Everybody gets triggered. Everybody feels overwhelmed. Everybody gets manipulated sometimes.
It's part of the human experience.
It is. It's part of being human. And the key is to be aware of these dynamics, to practice self-compassion, and to keep learning and growing.
Yeah, and to give ourselves permission to not be perfect, right? Like, it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly.
It's about not letting those moments define us.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination. There's no magic bullet, no quick fix. It's about making small, consistent choices each day that support your emotional well-being.
It's like building those emotional muscles.
Exactly. And the more we practice, the stronger we become.
Yeah, I love that. So it's really inspiring to think that we have that power within us. We don't have to be victims.
We don't. We can choose to live from a place of awareness, intention, and empowerment.
That's a great place to end this part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap things up, close out our deep dive into emotions. And wow, I think the thing that keeps coming back to me is how powerful emotions are. But they don't have to run the show.
Yeah.
It's like we're given this incredible tool, but no one tells us how to use it.
It really is. It's like getting a high-powered sports car without a driver's manual.
Right.
We can end up speeding and crashing, getting lost. But if we learn, how to use it, if we learn the rules of the road, we can really enjoy the ride and actually get where we want to go.
Right. And that driver's manual is kind of what we've been putting together here.
Exactly.
Understanding how our emotions can be used against us, learning how to forgive, and realizing that we can actually choose, to a certain degree, how we feel.
Right. It's about becoming more aware of the forces at play, both within ourselves and in the world around us. We keep coming back to this tone scale, and I know we talked about, the sort of controversial origins of it. But I think it's really useful to get a sense of, where we are emotionally and where we want to be.
It's like that roadmap for navigating the emotional landscape.
It is.
You see where you are, you see where you want to go. And I mean, it's not about being, up in those high vibes all the time.
Right.
Life's going to happen.
Of course.
You're going to have bad days. You're going to have moments where you feel down, anger, sadness, fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all those emotions serve a purpose. You
Yeah.
know, anger, for example. Anger can be a really powerful motivator for change.
Right.
But if we let it consume us, it can become very destructive. So, it's about finding that balance.
And that's where forgiveness comes in.
Forgiveness, yeah.
Because we talked about how holding on to resentment is basically like carrying around all this dead weight.
Yeah.
You're never going to get anywhere.
It drags us down, yeah. Keeps us in those lower emotional states. Forgiveness is about letting go of that weight. Not for the other person,
Right.
but for ourselves.
And it really is like that quote, forgiveness is the only way to dissolve that steel link.
Exactly.
It's incredibly powerful. And it's really for us. It's not for them.
It is.
So the big takeaway here, I think, is that you have more power over how you feel than you think you do.
You really do. It comes down to, making conscious choices about the emotions you want to cultivate, the thoughts you want to entertain, the energy you want to surround yourself with.
And emotions are contagious.
They are.
So when you choose to raise your own vibration, you're not only helping yourself,
Absolutely.
you're helping everyone around you.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It goes outward.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if you could choose how you feel most of the time, how would you feel? And what can you start doing today to feel that way more often?
It's a question worth asking yourself, I think, because the power to choose your reality, your emotional reality, it lies within you.
That's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.